like a big kick in the air. I'm like, man, I just did something, man, that was special. Like you knew it. You knew it in that moment, man. And so that was I think, after that game, you know, that play is running on the loop, you know, like, man, this one-hand catch, Michigan State,
right.
Charles Woodson,
yeah,
Heisman Trophy. At that moment, it was like all eyes on Charles Woodson, University of Michigan. This guy is a legit, you know, Heisman candidate.
Intercepted by Charles Woodson. Collins off the Heisman.
They will not catch Lamar Jackson.
35-40. He's on his way. Desmond Howard is going all the way. That is a Heisman Trophy winner.
What's up, everybody, and welcome back to Hello Heisman from the Varsity Podcast Network. Here we talk all things college football, but more importantly, we talk about the Heisman race. And I'm here with my guy, Jimmy. Jimmy, what's happening?
How are you, Des? Good to be with you again.
Yes,
and
sir.
This week we're going to kind of shift gears just a little bit. We're going to break the Heisman race down into three different categories.
Okay.
We're going to talk about the front runners.
Yep.
We're going to talk about some of the other people we should be watching.
Of
and we're going to
course.
talk about the dark horses. And we got a special guest, don't we, Desmond?
We do. We have a special guest, probably, Jimmy, my favorite Heisman Trophy winner, not named Desmond Howard, but he did go.
It's Archie Griffin, right? What, no?
Well, right conference, wrong team. No, man, it's my guy, Charles Woodson, man. I can't wait to talk to Charles, man.
Only defensive player, primarily defensive player, to have ever won the Heisman. Of course, a Michigan Wolverine, just like you,
100%.
Des.
Exactly. He was actually inducted into the Pro Football Hall of Fame this past summer, too.
Not bad. So he's
Not
got a
bad
yellow
at all.
jacket and a Heisman. All right, Des, Charles coming up a little bit later in the pod, but right now, let's get right to it. Some of the players to watch and maybe some of those that might not necessarily have been on everybody's radar earlier. All right, Des, relatively quiet week in college football. If you can characterize any week with a 9-overtime game as relatively quiet.
I know,
Alabama is 6-1. Bryce Young has got 26 touchdowns, just 3 interceptions. He is the current betting favorite in Las Vegas, not necessarily here, but let's take a look at the rest of the landscape. And we start with the front runners, at least the way we see it. Now, Kenny Pickett, don't really think he was on anybody's radar at the start of the season, but it was a big week for him. Pitt beat Clemson. Clemson, as we talked about last week, a very, very good defensive team, and Pickett had a good week. What's your impression of where he stands this week?
This was a big test for Kenny Pickett because, like you said, Clemson's having a tough season, but people still respect their defense. A lot of analysts believe that they have a championship caliber defense under Brent Venables. So this was going to be a huge test for Kenny Pickett, and he responded well. I mean, he's been consistent, just steady, game after game after game. Tossed 2 more touchdown passes. So he has 23 touchdown passes. Jimmy, only just one interception on the season so far. He's completing almost 69% of his passes. So this guy, and he's really pretty athletic too for a guy 6'3", 220. So now I believe there are a lot of the voters and people around the country, they're going to start to really pay attention to Pitt's quarterback, Kenny Pickett.
Yeah, got a lot of love this week. And now Pitt gets Miami, and they come off a big win over NC State, which is a pretty good football team. Okay, Ole Miss rolls on, beats LSU. Ole Miss ranked number 10 in the country. Solid but unspectacular game, I think most of us would agree, for Matt Corral, the Rebels quarterback.
Fake to Pierce. Corral keeps it, lowers his head, pumps it into the end zone. Touchdown, Ole Miss.
Great job, David Reed option. Obviously, Paris was tackled immediately. Guess what? He didn't have the football. Matt Corral pulls it and lowers that head.
On the year, though, very, very impressive, completing 68% of his passes, 15 touchdowns, also just the 1 interception, and he is also the team's leading rusher with just about 500 yards. Ole Miss travels to number 18 Auburn this week. What do you think about Matt Corral and his chances?
I tell you what, you hit the nail on the head when you said the team's leading rusher. Like 2 weeks ago, when they played Tennessee, the young man carried the ball 30 times. I mean, you have running backs, right, in the FBS that don't carry a ball 30 times, had almost 200 yards rushing. So for him to be the quarterback who's obviously out there navigating everything, throwing the ball, because you know Lane Kiffin's offense, you're going to throw the ball all over the yard. He's actually running the ball a lot, too, as a team's leading rusher, which really blew my mind. So I think that Matt Corral and what he's been able to do week in and week out, he's been a very consistent, steady performer. He's one to keep an eye on, too. Another big game this week, like you said, against Auburn.
Yeah. All right. I think Kenneth Walker, the running back, the transfer from Wake Forest, is definitely a front runner, too. We're going to get to him a little bit later. But speaking of Wake Forest and front runners, or at least other names in the discussion, how about Sam Hartman?
Should be 3rd down and 6. They just do change it. For Wake at the Army 41. Snap to Hartman. Looks middle and long and lets it fly for Roberson. Goes up to get it, and he does get it. Touchdown, Wake Forest, on the throw and catch that nearly covers half the field. 41 yards, and the Deacs have the lead back.
Last year, Wake Forest was 4-5. This year, they are 7-0, ranked 13th in the country.
Yeah.
Hartman has to get a bunch of the credit for that. 19 touchdowns, just 3 interceptions. Seems to have come out of nowhere, Des.
He really has. And I tell you what, we did a story on Sam on game day. Jen Latta did a story, fantastic piece, and how he carries the legacy of one of his teammates who is no longer with us. With him now, you know, every play, and it's just a very inspirational story. And you see that Sam Hartman is playing great football. Like you said, Wake is undefeated. They put up 70 points against Army. I think they scored on every possession they had. You know, we were coming to the game thinking, okay, well, you know, Army's going to win the time of possession. So Sam and them, they're not going to get a lot of opportunities. Man, I tell you what, he's playing at a high level. He's definitely someone to keep an eye on, especially because the Demon Deacons are undefeated too.
Well, I tell you what, you talk about scoring 70 points, and the Army, of course, with that running game is going to dominate time of possession. How about this? Wake Forest scores 70 points, and I think, and I'm not exactly sure of this, I think they had the ball for 17 minutes. 70 points, 17 minutes. Pretty good day.
That's called making the most of your opportunities, right? Being very efficient.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Since the loss to Oregon in the second week, Ohio State has absolutely, I should say, been on a roll. They got a lot of weapons, including a freshman running back, Travion Henderson. But a lot of it, some great receivers, a lot of it, though, is falling, or at least the responsibility would seem to be with C.J. Stroud.
3 wide to the right, single flanker, Wilson to left. Snap to Stroud, back to throw, arches it down the right side of the end zone, and it's caught by Olave.
Here he is.
For the touchdown, Chris Olave on a 16-yard TD catch from C.J. Stroud as he streaked down the right side into the end zone, and Ohio State's lead has grown to 29-7. What
do you think of his Heisman chances? He seemed to disappear after that Oregon loss.
Yeah, he really did. And, you know, the season actually started off kind of rocky for not only CJ, but for Ohio State. They had the opening game against Minnesota. They were trailing at halftime, just didn't look sharp. But, you know, Ryan Day, the head coach, is a excellent in-game adjustment guy. He makes adjustments on the fly as well as any coach in the game. And second half, they looked like a different offense, and they actually won that game. But then the following week, they played against Oregon, who was missing their star player, Kavon Thibodeau, and Oregon beat them up in Columbus. So at that point, you're looking at, okay, these are 2 challenges for the Buckeyes, and, you know, they didn't respond well, especially to the big challenge against the Ducks. After that, they went on the road. It's kind of like a tour. It's like a in case you forgot tour. Like in case you know, they want to show everybody who they are. And they just start steamrolling teams, beating teams by about 40, 50 points a game. You know, not the best competition out there, but they went out there and handled their business. Not sure if he's had a game now where I would look at him and say, okay, this is going to be a defense that's going to be a formidable opponent, where if you're putting up big numbers against this team, now I can see you being back in the Heisman race. So I haven't seen that yet, especially since the Oregon game out of C.J. Stroud and Ohio State.
Well, they get Penn State this week. We'll see, I think, clearly, aside from Oregon, you'd imagine that would be their most formidable competition so far. All right, you talked about Kavon Thibodeau.
3rd and 10. Back to throw again. DTR. Pressure down. Thibodeau.
DTR goes down.
Why you would ever even consider going one-on-one with Thibodeau? but man alive, is he something else out there.
If you're going to mention Thibodeau in the discussion of the Heisman, you'd certainly have to make him a dark horse, because only one man has ever won the Heisman as a primarily defensive player. Of course, that's your buddy Charles Woodson. We're going to talk to him shortly.
Yes, sir.
But what about Thibodeau? Does he have a chance?
I tell you what, Jimmy, I think he has an outside chance. Now, I think some of the voters will look at the season. He's missed a lot of snaps due to injury, and then he missed half of a game because of targeting penalties. So, because he hasn't played in some of the games, I think that may go against him. But we're in the second half of the season. He's going to play against better competition. Had a really good game against UCLA. So I think he has a really solid foundation to build upon, because coming into the season, people knew who Kavon Thibodeau was. So if he's able to keep building from what he just did in the UCLA game, I think he has like an outside chance of possibly being the second primarily defensive player to win the Heisman.
It's interesting, something you said in our meeting the other day, which is that whenever Thibodeau is on the field, he is far and away the best and most impressive
100%,
player, right?
100%. Yeah, when you see this guy, this guy is the best player on the field at all times.
All right, let's talk about another defensive player, the #1 Georgia Bulldogs and their defensive lineman, Jordan Davis.
There's the snap and the hold, and the kick is blocked. We blocked it. It never got there. It's picked up at the 3-yard line by Georgia.
Boy, it was a huge push there by Jordan Davis.
What are his chances? Because the numbers when he is on the field are staggering for Georgia and their defense.
I tell you what, Jimmy, this is when you start to separate the voters who really pay attention to people who just look for highlights on SportsCenter or something like that. Because if you're really paying attention, the way this young man affects a game, he's a disruptive force in the middle. And this is going to be a huge challenge for them now, because, Georgia's the top defense in the country. They're great against the run. Well, they're about to play the Florida Gators. And the Gators is one of the top rushing offenses in the country too. But he just demands so much respect in the middle, and he is nimble and fast for a guy who's 300 plus. So I think he has an outside shot too.
All right, a couple of dark horses there for the Heisman, and we didn't even get to Caleb Williams, the freshman from the University of Oklahoma, who had an impressive second half against Kansas. If there was such a stat as a save, you'd imagine he would have had to have gotten it. But speaking of defensive players, well, there's only one truly defensive player who has won the Heisman. That is Charles Woodson, University of Michigan. When we come back, a discussion with the University of Michigan's Charles Woodson.
Let's see if he goes that way. Jackson to throw, looking right. Now comes back, fires in the end zone, intercepted by Charles Woodson. Polish off the Heisman. Make room on the mantle. Charles Woodson took it away. An end zone interception.
Well, welcome back to the show. Today we have a very special guest, the 1997 Heisman Trophy winner. Not only that, he's a Super Bowl champ, and he was just inducted into the Pro Football Hall of Fame. That's right, the one and only Charles Woodson. Hey, Charles, how you doing, man?
Man, I'm doing great, man. How about you?
Man, I'm doing fantastic. Man, we really do appreciate you joining us today. I would love to jump into your journey as a Heisman Trophy winner. Like, coming into that season, you couldn't have been on too many, short lists for as a Heisman, even a candidate. So tell us about the journey. When did you know that, okay, I'm now a candidate for the Heisman Trophy?
Well, first of all, I'm going to try not to smile too much because it's state week. You know what I mean? I got to get my game face.
There you go.
My game face on.
There you go.
Yeah. But interestingly, my sophomore year, I played on offense. I got a couple of plays on offense.
Okay.
And then going into my junior year, there was, some slight rumblings, hey man, here are the, the Heisman guys, of course, Peyton was at #1.
Right.
A couple of other guys. And then, there was like, a little bit of, murmur, hey,
yeah,
this Charles Woodson, two-way player, maybe we'll throw his name in there. So
you're like an honorable mention or something, huh?
Yeah, kind of like an honorable mention, so.
Okay.
And then the first game of the season, we're playing against Colorado. Colorado was highly ranked.
Okay.
and we dominated them.
Wow.
You know, defensively.
Right.
You know, I didn't play any offense that game, but you know, the storyline was our defense. Okay. And so that, you know, that also helped as well. I did get an interception that game. And then just throughout the course of the early parts of the year, our defense really, really dominated. Okay. And that was really good for me. And then when it came to this week, you know, which is state week.
State week, yes, sir.
You know, we go up there, you know, State had a good team. You know, Saban was the coach actually up there, you know. So, you know, everybody was looking at, you know, upset alert, here's State, da. So we go up there to East Lansing, and then all of a sudden this play happened.
Talk to me.
You know, on the sideline where, you know, I jump in the air, one hand, tuck it, put in the ground.
Charles, see what, come on. You got do this play justice. Like, walk us through the play. Like, where were you on the field? What were you reading? What did the quarterback do? Like, because that's one of the most iconic interceptions in the history of college football. So walk us through that one.
Well, you know, I got to say I had a great coach in Vance Bedford, and Vance Bedford had really kind of gotten me to understand, you know, film, you know, understanding situations, understanding formations. And so that particular play, I think it was third down, but I just knew, I felt like I knew the situation. I knew what they were going to do. So I knew I'm in the slot. You know, this guy is going to run this little shallow crosser. Okay. I'm going to be all over him. They're not going to throw him the ball because I know what's coming. I know what they're running.
Right.
So really, there was really, you know, not a whole lot going into it. I'm like, I'm going to do my part for the defense. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, exactly.
I'm going to take this guy out of it. So he goes across the field exactly what I thought he would do. And if you watch the film, I'm like step for step with him, trying not to trip over his feet as I'm running across the field with him. But then we end up getting pressure. I think James Hall was in his face.
Okay.
And as he's scrambling across, I can see him, you know, he's still ready to throw the ball.
Yeah.
But I'm kind of in a position on the field where I said, hey man, if he tries to throw it away,
right.
If he doesn't throw it, this is going through my mind. If he throws it out of bounds and he doesn't throw it high enough, I may just try go get it. You know what I mean? You know, who knows what can happen. So I'm going across, and all of a sudden he winds back and he lets the ball go. And as I watched the film, I don't think he was throwing it away. There was a guy behind me.
Okay.
You know, at the same time. So I think he threw it just low enough to where he was trying to get it to that guy. And when he let it go, I could see the trajectory of the ball. And I'm like, oh man, I can get it. Boom. I just, you know, I leap in, grab it, you know, with the one hand.
Yeah.
And I know momentum is taking me towards the sideline. So I gotta corral this thing, and then I gotta get my foot down.
Right.
So I grab it, tuck, you know, pinky toe or big toe, one of them. You know, tap inside, and of course, I'm aware this is college football. I only need one foot.
Right.
And, you know, and you know, corral the ball, fall out of bounds. And when I got up, I knew what it meant, man. Like if you see the play and you watch how I jump up, you know, like a big kick in the air. I'm like, man, I just did something, man, that was special. Like you knew it in that moment, man. And so that was I think. After that game, you know, that play is running on the loop, you know, like, man, this one-hand catch, Michigan State,
right,
Charles Woodson,
Heisman
Trophy. At that moment, it was like all eyes on Charles Woodson, University of Michigan. This guy is a legit, you know, Heisman candidate. And then there's a few games in between where, you know, we played Minnesota. You know, it's kind of a tight game early. You know, I take a reverse. Run it in for a touchdown.
Yeah.
So, you know, some of the big games that we had, I was able to have a few plays that kind of put me out there. And then Penn State week came around.
Okay.
So we're doing a press conference. You know, they have a few players, of course, that talk, you know, during the week before those games. You know how they pull you in.
Yep.
And, you know, you got all the media there. And somebody asked me, hey, you know, Charles, do you think you're the best player in the country? And I was like, yeah. I do think that's in the country. And and then from there, then it magnified even more.
Right.
Because now I had, basically self-proclaimed, hey, I'm the best player in the country.
Yeah.
And then we go to Penn State. Penn State has, Curtis Enos, George Urovicius is the receiver.
Mm-hmm.
Quarterback, his name is escaping me right now. But they were supposed to be, I remember one of the commentators said that Michigan should just send the band there, let the band play, and then send and come on home.
Wow.
Michigan's got no chance.
Are you serious?
Yeah. I think it was Bino Cook, actually.
Okay.
I think it was
All
Bino
right.
Cook.
Yeah.
And so we kind of took that personal.
Mm-hmm.
And then from a team standpoint, we dominated early on both sides.
Gotcha.
But we suffocated, Penn State's offense.
Mm-hmm.
And as a defense, I scored a pass play on offense.
Okay.
And so at that point, it was like I had moved up to this guy. He may win the Heisman Trophy. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And I was kind of like right here. It's like Peyton Manning is still there. He's still the guy.
Right.
And then Ohio State came around, and you know how me and you punt return, same sideline.
100%.
All I did was literally follow your footsteps into the end zone. And that was a wrap. That was a wrap, man. That was really the season, man. And that's kind of how it went down.
Well, let me jump in here, Des, for a second. You talk about great numbers and great spots, Charles, and in a big spot like what you had in that Michigan State game can really draw the attention to somebody and make them a Heisman Trophy candidate. You might have a situation like that this week. You've got Kenneth Walker, great running back for Michigan State, who's actually leading the country in rushing, and playing against, his stiffest competition so far, although Michigan State has had a couple of good wins on the road. I'm just curious. We didn't get a chance to talk about him earlier in the pod, but I don't know how much college football you've been watching lately. What are your thoughts on a guy like Kenneth Walker?
Yeah, I mean, I watch it. I mainly pay attention to my guys. The
guys in the maize and blue, right?
The maize and blue. But I watch a little bit, and this could for him potentially be one of those games because our defense has been so stingy this year. And what a great job, our new defensive coordinator has come in and
Mike
done
McDonald,
for this team because they look light years ahead of what they were doing the last couple of years
100%.
under Don Brown.
Yep.
So I would think for the Michigan team, in particular, Josh Ross, who sits in the middle of that defense, like they're saying to themselves, not on my watch.
Right.
Yeah, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You got a guy on the other side of the ball who's, explosive. You just talked about all the yards that he's accumulated.
Right.
I think this defense, steps up to the challenge and say, hey, man, this guy is a guy they're talking about who could step into that Heisman forefront. Right. We're not going to let it happen on our watch. So I think the Michigan defense would do a great job of, stopping that.
Yeah, it's going to be a huge challenge for the defense. And Kenneth Walker, this is going to be his it's going to be the biggest game that he's had so far as a Spartan. I can't believe they let him get away from Wake. I mean, this kid was at Wake.
Do you believe
transferred from Wake, and they're like undefeated. Sam Hartman is playing out of his mind. So how did he get out of Wake? I have no idea. But I want to go back to C. Wood. So, okay, the Ohio State game is over. But before that, how was Lloyd Carr handling like all of that Heisman buzz, especially after the interception against Michigan State? So from that point till you doing the punt return against the Buckeyes, how was your head coach handling that Heisman buzz?
He never changed.
Really?
Lloyd was the same guy. Lloyd, the one thing I always took from Michigan is that no one guy was bigger than the team.
100%.
And that's really the way Coach Carr treated it.
Yeah.
And he would still have, like, Lloyd would do this thing during meetings, right, where we would play we'd be playing another team, and let's say that other team had a number 2 on their team, and we'd get into a meeting, team meeting room, and he'd show film on that number 2 at the other school, whoever we were playing, and he said, you know what? He said, hey, I just had a talk with the coach from such and such, whatever school was. And I told him that we would send him our number 2 if he would give us their number 2. And he turned me down. So we're stuck with our number 2, and hopefully we can go into this game and we can match up with these guys, because I told him I'd give my number 2 in a heartbeat. Like, that was so you'd sit in the meeting room, you'd be like, damn, man, where's the love? You know, he had that way about humbling you, and you know, it's, you know, in that moment it kind of stings a little bit, but you know, you appreciate it, man, because it kept it humorous, but at the same time, you know, it would take you down a notch or two, where you say, you know what, all right, if that's what it's going to be, you know what, I'm about to go show you, you know, why you should keep our number 2. You know what I mean? So, but Lloyd was great, man. He he knew it, especially with, you know, me being sprinkled in there, you know, at times on offense, that you know, there was a lot of hype surrounding it, but you know, Lloyd was Lloyd, man. So he didn't let that affect anything.
All right, just take a step back just for a moment to remind people, the quarterback of that Penn State team, I think it was Mike McQuarrie, who was
Mike McQuarrie. That's it. Yep.
That's right. It was a central figure in the whole Jerry Sandusky thing that eventually brought down Joe Paterno.
Good point.
But let's talk for a minute, Charles, about defensive players. So, as everybody knows, and as we've mentioned a number of times, you're the only purely defensive player who, or primarily defensive player, I should say, who's ever won the Heisman. Is that right? Should defensive players get more love? And if they don't, perhaps have we arrived at a time where maybe we should bifurcate the thing and give out an offensive award and a defensive award? Because, you know, the quarterbacks and the running backs and, you know, no disrespect, as the wide receivers are going to get all the attention because they got all the numbers.
You know, I mean, I really like that idea, to be honest with you. You know, having an offense and a defense, because, I mean, if you look at it now, if you look at, you know, all of the, you know, guys at the top, you know, Bryce Young, Bijan Robinson, Mississippi quarterback, Pitt's quarterback,
Matt Corral,
it's all quarterbacks, it's or a receiver or a running back, you know. And when you think about it, the reason why, going back to my year, the reason why I go into the Heisman weekend not thinking I'm going to win it is because if you look at what Peyton Manning did, of course, and you look at all of the yards that he threw for, the touchdowns, people are enamored by the numbers. And those are numbers that a defensive player they're never going to accumulate.
Right.
Even though I had, you know, in totality, counting the Rose Bowl, I had 8 interceptions. 8 doesn't compare with 2,500 or what, you know, whatever he threw for. So when you put those two numbers together, it's like that's who's going to win the Heisman.
Yeah.
So to your question, do I think it's right? No, I don't think it's right, because I think defensive players affect the game just as much as a receiver would or a running back would. If you look at, you know, Chase Young a couple of years ago, I think probably if he doesn't get suspended, I think 2 out of the last 4 games, he probably wins it. You know, if you think about all of the attention that he was getting every time, you know, he was on TV, all of the announcers were saying, this is the best player in the country. I think he probably wins it. And Ndamukong Suh, probably a guy who was, you know, very close when he was coming out. So, no, I don't think it's right that there hasn't, you know, been another one or that guys don't get the type of attention that they should because they're certainly worthy of it. And at the same time, I love your idea that maybe there should be an offensive award and then a defensive Heisman. Offensive, defense, I think I love that idea.
All right, we're starting a movement right now, right here.
That's it, right here.
Let me know why it's funny you mentioned Ndamukong Suh, because he was such a disruptor for us. And he's one guy who I thought probably deserved the award. Chase Young, I watched Chase, and as the season grew older, the competition got a little more stiffer. He wasn't as productive. But I'm going to tell you another guy. But you mentioned Chase being suspended. There was another guy who actually, I believe, would have won it had he not gotten suspended, and that was LSU's honey badger, Tyron Matthew. Tyron Matthew was on pace to win that award, and he got suspended. So as much as we talk about a lot of these players, their numbers can't compare to the quarterback's numbers, which is true, which is fact, and I love your idea, Jimmy. Tyron Matthew, had he not gotten himself suspended, I believe would have won the Heisman that year because he was outstanding. But again, he was following in Woodson's footsteps. He was also a return man, too. He was sensational as a punt returner. But it's those key moments, making those big plays like Charles Woodson did at Michigan State, that gives these guys these opportunities to at least get on the list and get on the radar.
Yeah, I think you're right because when you think about Tyron Matthew, he was doing all of these different things, and so when you talk about LSU, you'll highlight what he's done.
Right.
But when you think about, let's say, Ndamukong Suh, playing on Nebraska, when you highlight Nebraska, usually, they might score a lot of points. The offensive, highlights, or the highlights are all about what the offense did, not necessarily what the defensive player did. So being able to do multiple things, like for me, being on offense, you get some highlights that are a part of what the offense gets in addition to your defense being dominant.
Right.
So
right.
I think that's the, that was the, advantage that a Tyron Matthew had, but unfortunately, like you said, gets suspended. So,
yeah.
Well, I think what you're saying is that you can quantify, what even a guy like Tyron Matthew does, or like what you did, what Des did, because, there are those great moments, but, they don't only show up as highlights, they show up as numbers in a column. You with the 8 interceptions and the touchdowns that you scored. If you're a Jordan Davis, the numbers that matter, they're a little bit more diffuse because, I think when he is on the field, and we mentioned this a little bit earlier, the defensive lineman for the University of Georgia, the numbers just plummet for what the opposition's able to do. Right. So really, clearly, he has an impact. And I think it's going to take a guy like, not exactly apples to apples here, but I think it's going to take a guy like Lawrence Taylor, somebody who is just so electric as a defensive player that you can't take your eyes off him. And Des, you were saying this earlier, to a certain degree, that's Kavon Thibodeau.
Yeah, Kavon Thibodeau. There's no doubt about it. I mean, Will, you may watch a game and you may watch film, but when you watch it, like some people just jump out of the screen at you. Like they just pop. And Kavon Thibodeau is that guy. We had Chip Kelly on the show, and Chip Kelly talked about Kavon's get off. It's just like ridiculous. The way he gets off the ball is, you would think he was offsides, but he is incredible quick twitch. He's superhero strength. I mean, he takes tackles and walk them back to the quarterback. Fast, quick, and he's very agile. He's another guy, even though he's, primarily a defensive end, they're going to move him around in their defense because at all times, the quarterback and the center need to know where number 5 is on the field. And he's a guy who, Mel Kiper has him as, if he's not the number 1 pick, simply because the team may not have that need, he's a top 5 pick in next year's NFL draft. So Kavon Thibodeau, and to me, anytime he's on the field, he's the best player on the field.
Well, I think that's a problem you have because you talk about him being a disruptor, but disruptor doesn't show up on the stat sheet.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So I think that's further reason why there may need to be 2 different awards. Because if you have, Chip Kelly, who's an offensive minded coach, but he's talking to you about a defensive guy that really stands out to him. Like that's a coach's opinion, but then opinions don't show up in the stat book either.
Right.
So you got a disruptor, who an offensive coach thinks he's, as dominant as anybody.
Right.
But then when you look at the fact that a quarterback has thrown for, 20 touchdowns already and on pace for 2,500 yards and, their offense is ranked this and there's no comparison. So like you said, we started a movement today, man. Offensive Heisman, defensive Heisman.
Well, you know what they say about opinions? They're like something else. Everybody's got one.
Yeah. Well, we all use it. So.
Amen to that. All right, listen. Let me pivot a second here and talk about something else. So there's a bunch of discussion going on right now, and it looks like we're headed in this direction, that the number of teams that are going to be involved in the college football playoff are going to increase from 4 to perhaps as many as 12. As we've said before in this podcast, I hate the idea because I think the best thing about college football is that every Saturday matters. When you guys won your national championship back in 1997, you were undefeated. It's entirely possible if we go to a system where there are 12 teams, you're going to see a 2-loss team get into the playoffs. Should that be the way it is? How do you feel about the college football playoff, the way it's been? They didn't have a college football playoff when you guys won your national championship. I think it's great at 4 teams. Maybe it could go to 6, but 12? What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I like more teams in it because I'm a fan of the game, so you want to see more football.
Mm-hmm.
But then I think, too, a reason for it is when you think about, bowl games and you think about teams and the top players in the country nowadays opting out of those games because it doesn't mean anything. I think a playoff system, it includes more teams to where you get more of those guys that are actually going to play in that postseason. I think, if you take Alabama, it may be 4 teams left, but they might get in with 2 losses anyway. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Just because of their schedule.
Right.
So I do agree with more teams. When you take in consideration, a Cincinnati, what they've been able to do the last couple of years. You go back to UCF. UCF had a really good team. I mean, they could score basically with anybody.
Yep.
Who knows what could have happened if they could have got into the dance. I mean, they end up having a national championship parade anyway, so you might as well put them in the tournament. So
yeah.
So I like the idea of more teams, and then also you got to think about it, man, with the fact that players can make money now with NIL. There's an opportunity for these guys who are playing these extra games, and the NCAA is making more and more money.
Right.
You can compensate these guys for playing in these games. So I like, hey, man, bring on the more teams and let's have, really that true national championship where you can include some teams that normally would never even get a look.
Yeah, but listen, let me ask you this. We're all fans and like to see these games, but how would you have felt as a team that was 12-0 if you had lost the national championship to a team that had lost 2 games during the year and just kind of squeaked into the playoffs? Would you have felt that that's a legitimate national championship? It kind of feels like it's just a tournament win rather than a seasonal title.
Well, you know what they say on any given Sunday. So
that's the NFL.
Yeah. Well, I was playing for Sunday, so I made it. But I mean, 12-0, doesn't matter. If you can't go 13-0.
Right.
So that there's a responsibility with having an opportunity to play in the big game. You got to be prepared, and you got to get yourself mentally ready to play a game against a team that you don't think should be in there. Because they're happy to be in there, and trust me, they're going to come to play. So if you're as good as you say you are, get yourself prepared mentally and physically ready to go 13-0 or 14-0, whatever that may be.
Yeah, and that's something as NFL players that we experience. I mean, there's 2 seasons. I don't know if the common fan understands this, but there are 2 seasons, and Charles can attest to this. You got the regular season, but you play the regular season to get to the postseason. And everybody will tell you the postseason is a completely different monster. And you have to go into the postseason with a different mindset because now it's for all the chips. I don't care if this team had 4 losses or I don't care if this team comes in there with an O in the L column. We're going out there to destroy this team. So to Charles' point, Jimmy, if you lose to a team who may have had 2 losses, you had your shot. But you understand that this is an all-in tournament at this point, and this is what you played the regular season for. So it makes perfect sense. I'm for an expansion. I don't know if we should go to 12 teams, but I do like the fact that you give some of the group of 5 teams, or at least one group of 5 team, an opportunity to play with the big dogs because anything can happen. So I love it being a little bit more inclusive. So now the little guy, the group of 5 teams, they have hope. I mean, you got Cincinnati, and these teams, like Charles talked about UCF earlier, these teams, they're not just one-hit wonders. Like Luke Fickell and the Cincinnati Bearcats, they're not just a good team in 2021. Like, they've been pretty good for quite some time. They've built up that sort of equity that now nationally they're getting the respect that now they're ranked as high as they're ranked because they've been doing it consistently. So to give those teams an opportunity to play in the playoff, I think is a good idea.
Charles, let me hit you with one other question here. What about college football bugs you? If I made you the commissioner for a day of the sport,
that's a good question.
What would you change?
I know what I would change.
I want to hear about that. I would stop kicking guys out of games, man.
Say it louder. Say it louder for the guys in the back of the room, please.
Yeah, the targeting penalties, man, where you're taking guys out of a ball game, and then you suspend them, subsequently for the next week as well. I think it's all bad. It's no different than, last night I'm watching the game and there was a roughing the passer penalty.
The Monday night football game.
Monday night football. And, a lot of little ticky-tack, and sometimes it's just all about what it looks like. If it looks like a bad hit, throw the flag. And that's what's happening in college football.
Yeah.
And, the problem I just can't seem to understand why the leaders of both leagues don't understand is it's hard to try to adjust yourself mid-tackle.
Right.
And especially in terms of when you're going and you're in that target area, and then that offensive player also ducks at the same time, where your target area just went from here to a foot lower. And you can't stop that, know. And so this guy, so a defensive player ends up making a helmet-to-helmet hit that he didn't do intentionally. Yep. But then you go back, you look at the film, you see his head to helmet-to-helmet. He's kicked out of the game, and then for the next game as well. I think they got to get rid of that. And I think those plays also. I'm going to the NFL now. Hits on quarterbacks have to be reviewed, because you can't just give a team 15 yards and the guy hits him in that target area, but because his head snaps back, looks like a hard hit, it's automatic penalty. So I would change that with college football.
I agree with you 100%. That's one of my pet peeves, is to see some of these young men who, they work their butts off to have these opportunities to play in these big games too, and they get ejected for what amounts to incidental contact. Because, there's egregious tackles or hits on the field, but then there's incidental because it's a bam play. And the next thing you know, this guy's kicked out of the game. And like Wood said, if he's kicked out of the game in the second half, then that means he has to miss the first half of the next game. So I think it should be like NBA, where you have a flagrant 1 and a flagrant 2, and because they're reviewing everything. And once you review these hits, then you should be able to see if it was an incidental or accidental or an egregious hit where a guy launched himself, used the crown of the helmet or whatnot. So I agree with you 100%, and I think that's really strongly affecting the game in a negative way. But listen, we're going to have a break right now, and when we come back, we're going to have C. Wood tell us just some of the Heisman candidates that he feels very strongly about going to the second half of the season. We'll be right back. Okay, welcome back to Hello Heisman. We have C. Wood with us today. So Charles, tell me, give me like maybe 3 guys who you got your eye on as far as Heisman candidates are concerned.
I would have, I try to put somebody in other than the quarterback, but it's hard. It's hard, because I was, very high on Bijan Robinson, but his team just keeps letting them down and losing.
Yeah, I agree 100%.
Tough games late. But I would say at the top for me is still Bryce Young. I think to me he's the most talented quarterback that I've seen in Alabama in years. I think in terms of his quick release. I think you watch him play, he has a good understanding of defenses, where to go with the ball.
Okay.
Athletic guy. So I would still hold him at the top of my list. A guy who I think is coming along. He's going to have something to say, especially with the stretch of games they have coming, to C.J. Stroud.
Okay.
From the Buckeyes. I know he had to miss the one game. He was coming back from the shoulder injury, but
right.
If you watch him throw it around the park, I mean, he's easily, he's going to put up a bunch of numbers because they have offensive weapons, for days at the running back position and receiving position. So he's going to have those big numbers come the end of the season. And then just watching, some plays from Kenny Pickett the other day at Pitt, he had a couple of throws, man, that were really, really impressive. He had the throw where he was rolling out to his right.
Oh, yeah.
And he threw the ball right in stride, to the receiver, back corner of the end zone. And and it was an absolute dime. A couple of other great throws that game too, but that particular throw there was special. Like if you watch a game, you talk about things that pop off the screen. That particular play popped off the screen because of the accuracy, the way the ball traveled through the air, where it landed. The DB was in stride, with them, but because of the way the ball was placed, that receiver could continue running at full speed, run up under the ball. That was impressive. So I would say those guys would be my top three at this point.
Hey, listen, just one last quick one from me. Every time I interview an Olympic athlete, someone who's won a gold medal at the games, I always ask them, what do you do with your gold medal? I'm dying to know. Where's your Heisman?
It's right over here beside me, man. It's not far.
I'd sleep with it if it were me.
It's not far. Hey, but let me throw another name in there that he won't win it. I don't think just because of the fact that when he came into the season. Okay. But there's a Caleb Williams. His last name Williams.
Yeah, the quarterback. Yeah, for OU. Yeah, for Oklahoma.
Yeah. He's just. Man, that 4th and 1 play last week.
How about that?
Yeah.
Pistol formation, double tight ends. Kansas has everybody up on the line. The snap. It is a handoff to Brooks up the middle, spins away, push back. Taken by Williams, who goes forward to the 50. It's a first down.
I don't think you can do that on 4th, can you? Maybe you can.
As Brooks was going down, he handed the ball to Caleb Williams, who took it forward into Kansas territory for the first down.
When you talk about, signature plays and, during the course of someone's Heisman run,
right?
That play was it, because to have the wherewithal to
right.
Where else on the field would you think of taking a ball from your own player, but you have this potentially, a forward lateral illegally, forward lateral, but you have to think in your mind, hey, my running back didn't cross the line of scrimmage.
Right.
Let me go take it. Right. And then not only that, your running back has got to be thinking, I can't fumble the ball.
Right.
so he's really got to rip that thing from his own guy. Like
right.
that was something else. I watched that play 20 times because I'm trying to figure out, wait a minute, did he cross the line of scrimmage?
Right.
And then I'm thinking to myself, well wait a minute, is that legal?
Right.
Is that not legal?
Yeah.
Dude, I was all thrown off, man. I was like, oh my God.
And and Charles, add into the equation the fact that this guy's a true freshman. And a true freshman who had a high school season, which was cut short by COVID. Guy just hasn't played an awful lot of football. So as you said, to have the wherewithal to do that was a moment.
Yeah, I mean, what's funny is that, he'll depending on how this season goes, he'll be the quarterback next year. But when you think about the fact that, it's so easy to transfer now, just think next year he might say, I'm out of here.
Right,
you know what I mean? You never know. So they may have by default found their next guy, for the next couple of years.
Yeah, I think they did. I tell you what, you talked about Kenny Pickett and that throw and how special it was. Jimmy, let me tell you one thing, man. Anytime you can say the first or the only, then you're dealing with someone who's very special, and that's what we have in front of us in Charles Woodson, obviously the only primarily defensive player to win the Heisman Trophy. But, Jimmy, I was in Canton at the man's Hall of Fame induction.
Nice.
And his resume is ridiculous. I mean, like kids today say they got receipts. Woodson got receipts on top of receipts on top of receipts. Like, it's incredible. But adding to those receipts, he's also in the wine business, and he has Intercept Wines, and he has Woodson Bourbon. Tell us more about your wines and your bourbon.
Yeah, so many people know I've been kind of in the wine industry for quite a while now. Started in 2005. I had another label called 24 by Charles Woodson.
Okay.
And then I moved on to Intercept. I have partners out of Paso Robles, O'Neill Vintners, and a couple of years back, we came up with Intercept. So I moved from Napa Valley to Central California, Central Coast, and, Paso Robles and Monterey. 4 varietals. I have a Cabernet, a Pinot, a Chardonnay, and a red blend. And all, this is what we call ultra premium wine, so but very affordable. So if you go into a store, it's going to average between $19 and $22. So I've been, doing this for quite a while, man. We have national distribution. We're in over 45 states. And it's been very well received, throughout the country. And then also you mentioned the Woodson Bourbon Whiskey. It's distilled in Kentucky. And then after this aging process in Kentucky, we send it to San Diego, where my partners are at in San Diego, and then we finish it in Cabernet wine barrels. So, Woodson Bourbon Whiskey, CW Intercept Wines is the website for the wine, and woodsonwhiskey.com is the website for the whiskey. So, if you get a chance, man, people go online, order, check it out. I promise you won't be disappointed.
I know that's right. Yes, sir. Well, I'll tell you what, C. Wood, thanks for joining us. This has been a blast. And like you said, now I'm going to have to stop smiling, get the game face on, because this is Spartan week. Yeah,
easy, guys.
Week for sure.
Easy. Guys, easy.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, sorry, man. Sorry, got to do it.
It is what it is, Jimmy. It is what it is. C. Wood, man, hey, have a good one, bro. Thanks again for joining us. Really appreciate it, man.
Yeah, appreciate it, guys. Good talking to you.
Thanks, Charles.
All right.
All right.
Well, that was a great conversation with C. Wood, man. Really enjoyed it. And he talked about Michigan State and that iconic interception that he had up there in East Lansing. And this is a big weekend because Michigan's taking on Michigan State up in East Lansing. Both teams are undefeated. But it's also a big week for you too, Jimmy.
Yeah, it is. I've been working on something for the last year and a half. I got a book that I wrote with Mark Messier, the Hockey Hall of Famer. Great guy.
Yeah,
we've collaborated for the last year and a half on this, and it comes out, well, it came out this week. It's called No One Wins Alone, and I'll tell you what, if you talk about, the ingredients for a championship, this guy is the only man in the history of the NHL to have captained 2 different franchises to a championship. As a matter of fact, there aren't very many people in any of the 4 major sports who can say that, but he's a really, really unique individual. It was a pleasure getting to know this guy. And I tell you what, this guy is known as one of the great tough guys in the history of the league.
Yes,
and
sir.
I tell you what, he's got a side of him that just shocked me. He's thoughtful. He's really, really smart. And he's very, very sensitive. And his thoughts on leadership, which is really what the book is all about, were just fascinating to me. So it was a lot of fun, and I'm very proud of it. No One Wins Alone, Gallery Books.
100%. Hey, I need to get a signed copy of that. So could you please put one in the mail for your man over here? Please, appreciate that.
Done.
Signed copy. Okay. Well, listen, that's it for this episode of Hello Heisman from the Varsity Podcast Network. This show is produced in partnership with Learfield and Blue Duck Media. I'm Desmond Howard.
And I'm Jimmy Roberts.
We'll see you.